Hello, everyone. Welcome to this first curtain raiser on Unpredict, the futuring program of 361-degree Minds. We have distinguished panelists with us today, Mr. Manoj Fenelon and Mr. C.P. Gopinathan. Manoj is one of the few certified foresight strategists in the world today. He is a leading global consultant, a very, very popular faculty, and works with several leading organizations, multinationals, and universities globally on strategic planning in the 21st century and how to get that right in a scary VUCA world. It is our absolute pleasure to have you on this show, Manoj. Thank you so much for joining. A very warm welcome.
Thank you.
We also have Mr. C.P. Gopinathan, who joins us as a panelist today. He dons several hats. He is an entrepreneur, a trainer, a teacher by heart, an innovator, a co-founder of 361-degree Minds, and a very popular speaker at several international events. Very warm welcome to you, Gopi.
Thank you, Ruchita. Hi, Manoj. Hi, Sai. Hi, Ruchita.
Sai Sumant is my co-host for the show. He is also from 361-degree Minds. A very warm welcome to all our attendees who join us from different parts of the world. We get started now as we set our agenda for 2018. My first question to you, Manoj, is what are the top 2 fears of organizations globally?
Thank you, Ruchita. Before I answer that, let me add my welcome to all of the people who are attending this webinar. Thank you for being curious, most of all, because I know from the materials that I've seen promoting this event and this program, it sort of doesn't, it's not an intuitive thing to make sense of immediately. So I thank all of you for being curious, and hopefully we'll get to answer most of the questions that you have in the course of the next 20 minutes or so. As far as the question goes, Ruchita, I don't know about top 2, because I think we've got a nice spread of organizations and people represented here, all the way from startups to very big companies covering multiple sectors of the industry, and some might even be not-for-profit organizations or universities, for example. So I think if I were to look for commonality in the challenges that people are facing with planning, I'll mention 2, since you asked for 2, but we can quickly see that they relate to lots of other things too. So one is that, and you teed it up in the introduction, I think, there is an increasing recognition that we're living in a very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, which is abbreviated in that acronym you used, VUCA, which actually comes from the Pentagon. And if we accept the Pentagon as one of the master planners for world affairs in general, they do it from their perspective. But if they're referring to the operating environment as being very volatile and uncertain, that means that even they can't see where the world is going. So for organizations at a much smaller scale, they're experiencing that 10 times. You know? And just to give you a few examples, this is everything from sourcing of materials to how to dispose of waste to human issues. You know, how is the new generation of the workforce going to react to the way work has been set up so far? So I think the environment of uncertainty is making a lot of the conventional planning tools almost obsolete. Might be a slightly provocative statement, but a lot of the planning tools, not to essentialize them, but they're extrapolating from the past. So there's a lot of analysis on past trends, what has happened in the past, and there's very relatively unsophisticated extrapolation from that. You know, it's not a lot of complex non-linear dynamics or something. It's basically Excel spreadsheets where people are making very linear extrapolations about whether things will continue or be slightly different. And the world we're living in doesn't fit that model anymore. So there's a lack of, there's frankly a panic in the boardrooms about, okay, so what do we use to plan anymore? Or is planning as an activity itself in question? So that's one. The second one, which comes from a very different direction, is employee engagement, you know? So, and it's sort of a puzzle, because on one hand you have fears of automation and loss of jobs that's creating uncertainty. So you would think you'd have a more compliant workforce in some sense. You know, if you're a business owner, you'd think, people are going to be a bit more scared, worried about jobs, they'll take anything. doesn't turn out to be the case, especially with the millennial generation and the generation that's coming after them. They have very different ideas about work, about happiness, about what work is for, how they want to live their lives. One way of looking at them is to say, what do they know? You know, they're kids. They'll wake up to the real world. But I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. Especially the startups in the room will kind of recognize the drawing power of the different model of business that they're creating. So I could go on, but I leave it there. I think those are the things that people are most worried about.
I think, Rujita, your microphone is muted, so you might want to unmute it.
Gopi, would you like to say anything from your side?
Yes, I think I'm on the same page with Manoj with respect to, I'm not sure whether I can put my finger on top two, but I think there's a whole range of issues that should concern organizations globally. First is the sense of compass itself is vanishing. What's up north? What's my compass? So we're actually having to spend time figuring out what our compass is. Is revenue good? Is profits good? Is investor value good? Is customer value good? Is innovation good? So to me, the most important trend is that everyone needs to figure out their own north or their sense of compass. I think that's a major concern. We know of many organizations which did phenomenal revenue and profitability, and a couple of quarters later they were gone. So if I was measuring them with respect to revenue as a compass, they were doing well. But if I was measuring with respect to their lifetime, they were gone. They weren't doing well. So I think most chief executive officers' challenge is what's the compass. The second is a challenge about what does my customer want? What does the consumer want? What does he need? I think that's another fear, because I think he wants this and suddenly something else turns out in technology. So everywhere there is a sense of ignorance, the famous, the elephant experiment about how 4 blind men are going around and figuring out where the tail is. So I think we are losing in touch with our customer and consumer. We are losing touch with the human experience and emotion. We are caught up with technology. We are caught up with deploying technology. We're caught up in a whole lot of things, but we don't know what our end customer and consumer want. So one is a sense of compass is missing. Second, I'm losing my human connection with the customer. The third, which I think is a very famous parable, I don't know whether it is scientifically true, the parable about the frog, where if you put a frog in a boiling water, a frog would jump out. Whereas if you boil the water with frog, the frog will die. So I think many companies are getting boiled like a frog. And so startups that way, when they're jumping in, they're jumping out quickly and say, hey, this is not my area. But established companies are getting cooked in the boiling water. So to me, the three concern is, one is that where is my compass? Two, how do I really know what my customer and consumer want? And three, to ensure that my senses are out so that I quickly jump out of the boiling water. These are three fears I think most companies will have globally.
Right. So now, we see these fears and we experience them, day in and day out. We today see that organizations, small, medium, large institutions, universities, we have our fixed resources, whether it is people, it is infrastructure, there's a lot of investment happening on technology. There's so much effort that is going on in planning and strategizing. But as you all were rightly saying, that plans today exist only on paper. It is so difficult to stick to these plans. And gone are the days you used to make a 3-year strategic plan. You're now looking at 1 year, and you want to kind of keep reviewing it on a quarterly or even a monthly basis, with so many changes that happen outside of your control, whether that is on political side or economic side or technology side. So given all these challenges, how can organizations re-strategize in 2018 is my next question to you. How can they re-strategize their business?
Gopi, I think your answers have set us up nicely, I think. I mean, a simple way to say is to address the three challenges find ways of addressing the three challenges that Gopi enumerated. How do you get out of the boiling pot of water? How do you get a handle on things when they're changing so fast? And knowing what the consumer really wants when that's also evolving very rapidly. Let me start with something that might sound philosophical, but I think it's really important. It's at the level of accepting that we can't know or we cannot predict. You know, it's a very deep-seated assumption of people who've existed in a business world and in a planning environment where they've almost taken it for granted that, yes, you can make statements about the future and you can prove them to be true or false through analysis and research and all of that. So in some sense, there is the ability to predict. Different organizations might be good or bad at it, but nobody questions the fact that the future can be known. You know, the common assumption now is that, yes, it's scary for a lot of us, but there are geniuses out in the world like the late Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or this person, and they know. And if we all just figured out the best practice or the genius practice, we'd all be okay. But I think it actually works the other way around. I think to the extent, and I'm not convinced that these people can see the future or predict the future, they're essentially stating their wishes for the future. Yeah, which is the rest of the world sort of mistakes that as like, oh, that's the world, that's where the world is going because the guy said that and he's in a position of power. But there's no more validity to it than saying like that's an expression of his desirable future. But what about the rest of us? What about the rest of us that exist in very different settings and organizations? So I think as the first step, accepting the fact that you can't predict the future, you cannot predict the future, puts you in a very different state of mind, puts the organization in a very different state of consciousness about how to go forward. And that can lead to, Gopi brought these things up, right? That can lead to questions about what business am I in? What's my purpose? Which is a question you'd think that businesses would ask all the time or organizations would ask all the time or constantly or on a periodic basis and kind of renew. In my experience, it never happens because it feels like, well, we all kind of know, it's obvious, we do it every day. So why even remind ourselves of why? But I think over time, especially for established organizations that have been around for a while, that sense of why gets lost. You know, and most people tend to define the organization, but the how or the what. So in terms of, you know, people talk about their jobs as doing a certain process within an organization or a function or making a certain product. They don't talk about their work in terms of what the user gets from what this business offers. You know, so nobody says a consumer packaging company that caters to mothers' needs or young children's needs. Nobody says, I'm in the business of helping mothers or making mothers' lives easier. That's not how they define what they do, right? They say, I make baby talcum powder, or I work in, you know, some manufacturing, or I do plastic bottles, whatever it is that they do. And I'm giving you a personal example, but at an organizational level, that sense of why they exist gets lost too. So that's one question you can re-ask if you accept that you don't know what the future is going to look like. This question sort of comes up naturally at all levels of the organization, not just in the C-suite. Similarly, the search for new approaches. So how do we go about figuring out where we want to go? And that also brings in a more participatory approach. You know, I think people in leadership find themselves almost forced to involve other people, where it's not a natural instinct sometimes, and it can lead to very good outcomes outside of the strategy realm, just in terms of morale, how people feel involved in the organization. But I'll stop there because I think I wanted to emphasize that shift in mindset of accepting that the future is so volatile that prediction is just not an option anymore.
Gopi, can we hear your views on this?
Yeah, I think Manoj kind of covered most parts. I just like to add a few shades around it. Firstly, I think there used to be a time when we talked about how your weakest link, you're as good as your weakest link. Now I have a different take. I think wherever the organization is soft, that's your strength. That's where you're nimble. Wherever your organization is strong, deeply embedded, deeply entrenched, that's your weakness. So you're not going to pivot from deeply embedded positions. So if I was heading an organization, my point would be that I would like to be soft in as many positions as I can. So pivoting is very easy. The more deeply entrenched I am with my revenue model, product model, innovation process, that's where the shortcoming is going to come. Maybe 10 years back, we talked about core competency, deeply entrenching. I think sometimes that can just come back and haunt us. So we need to be very good at what we are doing. We need to be very soft and nimble, like any sport that you take. Okay, and where you train for the structure, but when the moment comes, your body is ready to do whatever it wants. So can I build an organization like that? Manoj, you want to say something?
Absolutely, Gopi. Your metaphors are very rich and just bringing up a lot of things for me. So one of the ways, if people prefer another way of coming at the same thing Gopi said, he was talking about the soft parts of the organization and the strong parts. I could voice the very same thought, but I'll give you a different metaphor, if you will. The core of the organization and the edges of the organization. Exactly the same thing that Gopi said. Leaders typically tend to look at the core of the organization, and the periphery or the edges are the edges for a reason, right? I'll give you a concrete example. Nobody thinks of waste disposal. Let's say a typical manufacturing concern. Nobody thinks of waste disposal as a core function, yeah? In an era of sustainability, that assumption is going to get shaken up. It already is getting shaken up. And there are companies that have discovered new revenue streams that might be the core of their future growth, coming from how waste is now a utility for somebody else or for some other process, because they're having trouble handling the waste. So it starts off as an annoying problem somewhere on the edge, where the core of the organization is worrying about finance or, you know, how to get the next generation of tools and machines. Meanwhile, you're having a waste issue and people are like, can we just have this go away? It's an annoying problem. But if you look at it with a different mindset, saying the things on the edges are possibly, not guaranteed, are possibly indicators of where things might lie in the future, just possibly. And if you're looking at it with that mindset, you come up with the next big innovation, maybe, yeah? Or your odds are better than if you're looking just at the same question you've been asking your innovation department for the last 10 years.
Yeah, so I think, thanks Manoj, I think the edges kind of captures exactly what I wanted to talk about. So to me, the way I want the organization to re-strategize is to be nimble. And how do I remain nimble? Are you organic? Are you bringing in new approaches by the dozen? Are you participatory? Are you participating with your employees, your customers, your customer family members, your customer regulatory environment, your customer's ecosystem? Are you participatory? And finally, I think I need to re-strategize on the new customers that are coming in. You know, every business that we are operating, there's always a new wave of customers who come in, new set of mobile phone users, new set of app users, new set of television buyers, new set of car buyers, and they're coming in with completely different preferential set. So it's very important that are you ready for the new wave of customers. So if I were to re-strategize, I would be nimble, be organic, bring in new approaches, be participatory, and most importantly, I would be ready for the next wave of customers.
So that was very, very informative. Now, taking from that, which means clearly predicting is out, forecasting is not working anymore, and then all the areas that you spoke about truly need to be strategized, or rather re-strategized. There's a lot of talk going on today about remap your strategy, or reimagine your strategy through futuring. So what is futuring, and how different is it from predicting or forecasting? Is it a new technique by itself, or is it a new buzzword that is making its round?
Futuring is, I think, and jump in on this, is I think our attempt to add a friendlier tone to a word foresight, which is the technical discipline that I was trained. I wouldn't call it technical. That's a discipline behind futuring. And foresight, unfortunately, turns out to be a very clumsy word. It suggests what we're trying to communicate, but it's unnecessarily complicated, I think. So futuring is our attempt to simplify that. Futuring, following on what we've been talking about so far, is at its very simplest level an attempt at collective imagination, participatory collective imagination. Applied, and this is, as you can imagine, it has a very broad sphere of application. It's used by governments, it's used by world bodies. I know the people who meet in Davos, the World Economic Forum, they have a foresight group. They're doing foresight for entire countries and entire regions, etc. I've heard of foresight initiatives at the scale of 7 countries that border the Arctic Ocean coming together and saying, what is the future of the Arctic Ocean? And how do we manage that jointly as countries who have a vested interest? All the way down to the level of startups and entrepreneurs doing it for a 4-person organization. So it's a very flexible approach to figuring out the future. One level down, what are some of the mechanics of it? One of it is accepting uncertainty and sort of going with the reframing the question to start with. Asking different sorts of questions is a very important part of the methodology. And from there on, I think in a sharp answer to your question, Ruchita, it's a little bit of combining some things that we can know and a lot of things that we don't know, that you have to observe the edges to have a decent idea of what's coming, whether it's trends and you combine those two things in a creative or imaginative way. And you try to create these story worlds, which is again my friendlier attempt to explain scenario planning. These story worlds that provide a very human and comprehensive backdrop against which you can try out different things. And this is where the whole approach that startups are pioneering comes in, that trying out can utilize or leverage all these lean startup methodologies. So you de-risk that process so it doesn't seem like organizations are trying everything at a lot of expense. But maybe I rushed through this, but that's sort of the sequence of futuring methodology. Try to ask better questions at the front, because there's a lot of the process of planning that hinges on the questions that you ask. And it's become an underappreciated art in conventional planning because people assume the question is the same as last year's plan or the year before. But now that we have the backdrop of this uncertain world and lots of new ways of asking questions, there needs to be a little more effort and time and reflection, I think, of asking the right questions for the planning cycle. And then methodology-wise, it becomes, okay, now that we don't know, how do we combine? And when I said some of the things that we know, these are on the level of, I'll give you an example. The population of Europe is aging. That's just a demographic trend. So by 2030, they expect half the population of Europe to be 60 plus, something, not the exact numbers, but that's the kind of thing that we can know because that's already in motion. And most people agree that that's irreversible. People have already been born, etc. And there's nothing drastic going to happen to life expectancy. So there are a few things like that. We're going to have scarcity of some resources. We're running out of oil. So when we said, the future can be predicted, we didn't mean to issue such a blanket statement saying we cannot know anything. But how do we combine some things that we know with a lot of granular things about the future of organizations, where the customer is going, what the needs are? Those are the really uncertain things. So how do we bring these things together in a very creative kind of process that might appear very unfamiliar to organizations? Because very often planning departments aren't the places where creativity lies. If it exists at all in business, it's certainly not within the planning groups.
Thank you, Manoj. Gopi, would you like to, I'm sure you have, something to say about.
I think I'd like to broadly focus on 3-4 words, and I'll keep it short because I think Manoj very eloquently covered the entire gamut of futuring. I think the 3-4 keywords for me is participatory, the question, sensing, and signals. These are 4 keywords for me. One is how participatory it is. Is it top-down, bottom-up, left, right, entire organization, entire ecosystem? I think futuring to be is about how much I can get people to participate in that exercise. So that's a key word for me. The second keyword, as Manoj said, that I would like to kind of reinforce, what is the question that you would like to ask yourself? That's critical. I think that's where a lot of us need to focus on. And I completely agree with Manoj. We're all trained in our academic system to answer questions. We're not trained to ask questions. I don't know of a single university which comes out with an answer paper and says, why don't you question it? So we all know how to answer. So the second part is, what's the right question? The third, I like to use the word sense here. To me, I could be very tactical and follow a Western construct of work-life balance and professionalism, but to me, it's an Eastern construct of what's your sense of the business? What's your ball sense? What's your field sense? To me, I need to tap into that. They may not be very loud signals, but they're there somewhere in your body, your organization body. I need to sense it. And fourth, signals. And I think, in one of my earlier conversations, a very thought-provoking conversation outside a tea shop in Chennai when Manoj had visited us from New York, we talked about the signals are there. We need to catch it. The future is there today. It is scattered. We need to focus on those signals. If I was running an industry, I'd like to look at what are the signals in which my future of my industry is embedded. So these are 4 keywords for me. 1, how much participatory can I get? 2, what's the question I would like to ask myself? 3, get my senses in futuring. And 4, where are the signals? And remove the noise out. The question will help me to remove the noises so that I can focus on the sense the signals, so to speak.
Gopi, just to piggyback on that, I'm so glad that you brought up signals, which is also a very precious input for creating scenarios and imagination. And you laid it out beautifully, because without the right question, there might be signals right in front of your face, but you don't know to look for them. And it was captured in a famous quote in the futuring circles from a science fiction writer called William Gibson. And he said, the future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. And I would add, it's not in the places that you're looking for normally, because you're asking the wrong question or the outdated question.
Taking a cue from there, one thought that comes to my mind is, commonly people believe that disruption is going to come to somebody else. They're very safe and their organization has been there, or they've kind of led organizations before, and they pretty much have it in control. Till one fine day there is some disruption that comes from a completely unexpected corner, and then you start panicking, and you want to then re-strategize or then bring in technology. You want to try and do something to fix it and to survive. Now, taking the cue from what you were saying, so one is there a structured way that you can, that leaders across the world today, may they be leaders of small organizations, large organizations, multinationals, is there a way that they can learn futuring in a structured way? Are there simple techniques that they can learn and apply to their business? Because the reality is today, even a small grocery shop on the street has been impacted by e-commerce. Even they want to offer their grocery on WhatsApp today. Even the local transport today has got impacted by the Uber app, where everybody knows there is such a simple way of traveling. Nobody wants to go through the regular common challenges today. So everything is changing around. As an organization leader, I would like to know how relevant is this for me? Do I need to learn futuring? And is there a structured way in which I can learn futuring?
I'd like to go in first, and maybe Manoj can kind of follow this through.
Sure.
I think I will kind of park the word structure on the right-hand side, because structure triggers many legends and symbols. So I'd like to say, is there a way to learn futuring? The answer is a loud yes. And you also talked about other simple techniques. Absolutely simple, organic techniques, very possible. Is there a structured way? No, there is a step-by-step, linear, circular process. Much like the way, is there a structured way to childbirth? Every child is unique and there is a birth. At a broad level, there is a structure. So my short answer is, most certainly, as a senior executive, futuring as an art can be learned. And at the same time, there is a lot of unlearning that's going to happen. When I say a lot of unlearning, that we're all so used to doing things one way. And especially when we get better at it, the danger of repetition makes us harder neurons and harder connections. So to me, yes, you can learn futuring. If I may use a word, you also need to unlearn a lot of fasting. So it's going to be learning futuring and unlearning a lot. And most certainly, there are many techniques and processes. If you're a part of the program, you would be able to learn. So with this pedagogical approach, I'd like to pass this question on to Manoj for him to answer this as well.
You're leaving me nothing new to say, Gopi. I'll try. I couldn't agree more with Gopi's answer. Yes, the answer to Ruchita's question is yes, if we're willing to tweak our definition of and understanding of the word structure a little bit. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. there is a way to learn, because it's a discipline that's being offered at the master's level at universities. Only a couple so far that I know of, at least. One is in Hawaii. So for those of you who want a master's degree in Hawaii, you can get a futuring degree at the University of Hawaii. So it is being taught. But to follow up on Gopi's observation about the structure, it's not the kind of structure that people have expected, especially in the context of strategy or planning or innovation, in the sense of there's a predetermined sequence of steps, and if you followed it, you're guaranteed some sort of outcome. This process of futuring, if you will, because it is participatory, because it places such an emphasis on sensing, and it's a very Zen-like state of being in that moment, in that process, wherever you are, and not looking too far ahead. Yeah. So in that sort of a process, what typically happens in my experience of leading these kinds of programs is the group will absolutely have a cogent way of stepping into the next step. The next step may not have been what was on paper when you announced the process, at the very beginning, but it will be an absolute group decision. It will make sense. They can explain to you the rationale of why they're taking this next step. It just may be very different because of what they've discovered in the previous step. That will determine where you go. So there's not a predetermined sequence of steps saying like, okay, after 2, we always do 3 because that's the way it works. This is such a live exercise because you brought more people into it, and people who've never been in kinds of planning things before. So you have to allow for their inputs changing the entire conversation, and you have to be prepared for that. And sometimes being prepared for that means you'll take a step, that doesn't conform to any normal definition of structure. Having said that, the more creative people in the room, people who've either worked with artists or other creative professions, they'll recognize this process or structure perfectly. It's just a different kind of structure. It's how artists and creative people work. They absolutely have a process, but it's not a very linear one that sort of engineers are used to, let's say.
So Unpredict, what is Unpredict, and what will, it's a futuring program is what we understand. So what is Unpredict, and what will be the outcomes of this program?
I'll give you a personal answer that I hope will be useful to people too, because this is how I'm looking at it as a participant in putting this program together and sharing it with people. And I'm so excited for, Gopi and your team's excitement for this too. So to me, it's a bit of a sampling, in the consumer packaged goods business, everybody's familiar with sampling. It's sort of how you induce people into trying something new. So Unpredict to me is our attempt to get people to try futuring on the most convenient scale that they can now in the midst of very busy lives, knowing that you cannot make a commitment to a new thing that lasts. Ideally, we'd say, come join us for a 3-month foresight exercise and we'll help you figure out some important problem for your organization. Given that this is new, we've just talked about it for 25 minutes. I don't think anybody's going to take that jump. So Unpredict for me is sort of, can we do this in a day or a couple of days to give people a sense for it? Enough of a sense that they can make a very informed and sensible choice involving all of their multiple intelligences, having experienced this, saying, do I want to take the next step? Do I want to maybe try this out for a particular question in my organization or with a particular goal in mind on a slightly larger scale? So this is our kind of sampling offering. And I'll end with this from my side. Foresight or futuring can do that. I kind of view it as an accordion, so you can have it fully open, which is sort of, I've been part of processes that lasted 3 years. Roughly the same process, asking better questions, collecting signals, putting scenarios together, figuring out what to do in terms of strategy. But I've also done that in half a day. You don't lose the essence of foresight or people's ability to understand what we're doing. You do lose a lot of resolution, as you can expect. The answers that you come up with won't be as clear, or you won't have as much time to debate the questions. But I think in a 2-day kind of exercise or event that we're planning, it's enough to allow people to get an experiential sense of how this thing works, make their own judgments about, did it bring up a lot of new questions for me? Was it worth it? Did it make me uncomfortable in a productive way? Did it get my team to see each other in a new way and figure out interconnections that they hadn't seen before? And all of those things are experiential questions. You know, people can listen to us or read a brochure, but ultimately the proof is in the experience.
Yeah. So, Rujita, I will take the outcome question first. And what is Unpredict? I think it's a nice marketing name. The two gentlemen, one with the beard and one without the beard, came up with. So it's essentially futuring. Now, what will it deliver? Outcomes, to me, if I were to say an executive before Unpredict and after Unpredict. Okay. So after Unpredict, I expect to give 4 takeaways. One, there'll be a very powerful appreciation of the complexity of the 21st century challenges and the inadequacy of the conventional planning. So that will be the first change. The second, he will be completely sold on the participatory futuring. Second, so only when you appreciate it, you can start practicing it. Third, there will be a very powerful framework with processes, action, suggestions, which he or she can take back to the organization and work with his team to arrive at what is called a collaborative futuring. And finally, most importantly, tools and approaches wherein they can convert these insights into action. So to me, there are 4 outcomes. One is to understand the inadequacy of the current planning methods. 2, appreciate the collaborative featuring. 3, get a grip on the process of futuring so that you can go back into your organization. 2, 4th, an ability to convert those insights to actions. This is what an executive would achieve over a 2-day and a follow-through period at the end of the futuring program.
That is very useful. Thank you so much, Manoj and Gopi. I have a lot of questions that are coming in from our participants and attendees on this webinar. I think, Sai, if you can help me answer some of these, and if you want to pass any of these to Manoj or Gopi, please feel free to do so. So the first question is, we understand that this will be a 2-day program that is going to be happening in the month of March. We would like to understand 2 days may not be enough. I'm worried that 2 days is not enough for me to learn futuring. Will the facilitators be available, for any consulting, or will they help me after the program?
Yes, there is a follow-through inbuilt into the whole program. So while 2 days sets up nicely for their journey from there on to do their own futuring, whenever they need help, they can always request for time of Manoj or a Gopi in slots of 15-20 minutes or a half hour, pre-book it. And it won't be more like consulting, it'll be more like e-mentoring. So that may be the right way of putting it. So yes, certainly for a period of 6 weeks to follow, they have an access of Manoj and Gopi on demand by pre-booking their time.
There's a question on, since we talked about different kinds of participants attending this webinar, they represent different industries. They represent also, some are coming from the academia. And then we are talking about a participatory approach. So who should attend this program? Is a question
right. Right. So anybody who's leading a function, all the way to leading an organization and a large institution, would have a lot of takeaways from this program. So in a very conventional sense, CEOs, CXOs, business leaders, not limited to them, anybody leading a function, a region, anybody having the geography or a business unit or an institution to map out a future for has got a lot to take away from this program.
And will the mix of the industries they represent, or or the geographies that they represent, will that will that prove to be synergistic, or will that kind of leave me in a lurch that I don't know, my industry doesn't have this problem, or my region doesn't have this problem? Will that happen?
I'm sure the butterfly effect that we all know of in the environmental sphere is more so true in this VUCA world, right? So a small flip somewhere, or a small company taking birth, probably in a Hawaii or a Papua New Guinea, can shape how we consume things here in India. So that from that point of view, the more the diversity, the more richer the program can only get. So to answer your question, yes, we are not keeping it limited to any particular geography or to industry, because this topic cuts across industries and geography. So the more the diversity, the merrier it can get.
Okay. And what will be the batch size, since the attendee has said that what will be the batch size, since this will be very new to me and I would expect some personal hands-on or personal time kind of a thing. So what is going to be the batch size is the question.
Yes. So to keep the efficacy, keeping the efficacy in mind, we are keeping the cohort size to about 20. 18 to 20 or about 18 to 22 is a sweet spot. 20, you could expect about 20 size of cohort size of 20. Yeah.
Okay. Will there be an opportunity to network with the rest of the participants, since we are expecting CXOs from different industries, different organizations to be there, and then you have Manoj, who I know time with him and of course with Gopi is not very easy to get. So will there be networking opportunities during the course of this webinar, the event?
I'm sure the best networking that can possible is doing things together, working things together, co-thinking with people. I think that's the pinnacle of networking or bonding with people. I'm sure this entire program is structured in a manner which is hands-on. There is not going to be much of one-way prescription kind of method that's applied. So as it's hands-on group interaction, there's I wouldn't use the word networking, but if you are looking for forging relationships that transcend the 2 days, that's going to happen.
Okay. Manoj, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Ruchita, in my 5 or 6 years of doing foresight, this benefit, if you want to call it that, is the one that participants bring up almost all the time, even for people who didn't come to the session looking for that. So when you ask them at the end, what did you get out of this thing? They'll mention a lot of the outcomes that Gopi teed up, but they'll also mention this, saying, wow, it was really interesting to meet. And don't think of this as, because the beauty of collaborative processes is that you don't need to wait for the break or the evening reception to talk to other people. The content of the program itself is understanding how others are talking about their business and what challenges they're facing. So the process itself is a wonderful experience in terms of understanding how people in similar or different things are going about the same, dealing with the same issues.
I think, Rujita, if we can't be teaching swimming in a basketball ground. So we got to be in the water to teach swimming. So collaborative is the key word in the futuring. So there'll be networking, there'll be collaboration all the time, and ideas will be clashing all the time. So they'll be very much in the water swimming all the time. So networking will be happening.
So where can one find details of this program, and how can one register for this program?
For both the answers, the go-to places, the program name unpredict.361learning.com.
Where is the first program scheduled, and is there a last date to register?
Yeah, it's happening in the 3rd week of March. All the details of the program are available in unpredict.361learning.com, and the last date is February 28th. So that's what we are looking at as a cutoff date for this.
I guess Singapore is the venue, right, sir?
Singapore is the venue, yes.
There is one last question that I will try and accommodate for time.
I think that
is there an early bird discount?
See, I wouldn't like to call it an early bird discount. Probably yes. The price might get steeper if it is 10 days from now. So till January 26th, we are offering it at 2,500 USD, which roughly is about lakh and 70,000 rupees translated into Indian rupees. Thereafter, it goes back to, if you may say so, the rack price of 3,000 USD, which is about 300 USD, which is about 2 lakh rupees.
Okay. Okay. We have some more questions that are actually pouring in.
Yeah.
For
I think we can take a couple of these questions.
Sure. I'll Gopi, chime in anytime you want. The two things that I've read, and if I'm missing something, please someone just shout it out. One was from Terence, who's asking if futuring is geospecific. Yes. Depends on the question you're asking, but in the specific example that he's referring to, what kind of process should be adopted by a foreign company trying to set up a venture in a different, or a branch in a different country? I just wanted to say, when you look out at the landscape today, I find the world is chock full of examples of companies who are paying for not having done a sort of collaborative futuring process with stakeholders or people in the countries that they're going to be setting up operations in. This is everywhere from people complaining about huge beverage companies pulling out water out of the ground, where there was no consultation with the community, to a lot of environmental related issues, to what's happening in the Congo now with minerals and armed gangs and government instability and all of that. The list is endless, and not necessarily dramatic problems like these, even slighter, relatively slighter tensions. But I can't tell you how powerful of evidence it is for the benefits of doing some sort of collaborative process, trying to imagine the future when a big company comes into.
In fact, just to give an example to Terence, that there's a very, very multi-billion-dollar company, maybe double, triple-digit billion-dollar company, who was doing an R&D and came out with the educational program for India. So they were wanting to solve the communication skills for the unemployed youth. So I was a part of their, they built the product and they decided to do collaborative futuring and hindsight. And they showed the product to me. And in a couple of minutes, I said, you might have to reconsider the whole thing. And they said, how is so clear? The first lesson of that communication skills was vocabulary for dating in India. So I told them that, yeah, you completely got it off wrong foot. So geography is, you might just trigger riots in few parts of India if you actually teach this. So yes, it is very, very geo-sensitive. And more than geo, I would say it's very context-sensitive, for sure.
Yes. And the other question I read was a question around, is futuring, let me actually go back to that question. Does the workforce need a new skills matrix for the 21st century? The conversation that I've heard, and I don't want to pitch this as just a nomenclature change, and I've heard this from people who are at the pinnacle of HR consultants, if you will, or people who do searches for leadership positions worldwide. Some of the biggest companies are doing that. They're talking about competencies, not skills, when you go into the 21st century. And this is a little bit of the structure conversation we had a bit before, skills and matrices, and that belong to a very structured world that just is not going to be able to cope with all the uncertainty. So what people are going towards for the 21st century is competencies, which are a broader set of clusters of skills, if you will. To use an example, developing emotional intelligence or being able to sense the needs of others is something that humans are innately capable of, right? It's a competency that I think through a lot of formal education gets lost because we're emphasizing other parts of the brain or human development. So now it's coming up as a big need in the workforce, but it's not traceable to one skill like, you need to know how to do an exit interview with a person who's leaving, or you need to do hiring interviews in a new way. Those are examples of skills that have been taught. The world we're moving to is like, you need to have emotional intelligence, and there will be help along the way, but it can't be traced to like, you should do A, B, or C. It would just be like, develop an ability to work with others and sense their emotional needs. That might manifest very differently. So we have to reconfigure training also to teach these competencies in a broad and more flexible way instead of in a matrix way.
Yeah. There's another question. How can an organization gain the agility and how are we able to recognize weak signals? To me, it's a very standard way to look at this problem is that for me to be agile, my information circuits have to be really quick and fast. That's number one. A lot of agility doesn't happen because the edges and the core don't talk to each other. So how strong is your communication signal between the edge and the core? And number two, if at all there is an information that's passed from edge to core, it's not that the core need to respond to it, everybody in the line need to respond to it. So is the purpose, common purpose shared? Is the alignment shared? Is the purpose and the question is shared? So then it becomes a lot better. So your ability to transmit the signal and your ability to respond not just in the core or on the edge, right through how you will respond to agility. Coming back to weak signals, I think it's a brilliant question that how do I identify weak signals? My ability to transmit the purpose of the organization across the core and across the edges will make my signal spotting very easy. It is just that people in the edges and the periphery and the center are not connected to the purpose, so I don't even know where to spot the signals. So if the purpose is truly shared, I'm sure ability to spot the weak signal.
Thank you so much. I think
Sai, you're on mute as well.
Sai, you're on mute.
So there's one last question that's come, which is if there are participants from diverse backgrounds, how will the challenges which are specific to them get addressed? I think it's a very relevant question that one of the interested participants
That's a really good question. It's something that I will say Gopi and I and those of us who are helping facilitate this thing will have to spend a lot of time thinking about, because, and I'll be very upfront about this, the Unpredict scenario is going to be a little bit artificial in that sense, for the same reason that the questioner asked, because we're tackling people with very different organizations, industries, regions even. So we'll come up with a topic that's useful, but useful more in the sense of illustrating how the process works and the benefits. It may not be the most immediately relevant thing to people's businesses, but will make it useful. You know, it won't be such an abstract exercise that, oh, it was just for illustration purposes and it has no use to their planning. But of course, it won't be directly tailored to one particular group. But we'll try and pick examples are, you know, what are the big technology, how is technology going to change stuff, or how is platforms going to change the way value is created? Broad questions like that I think will be relevant to a lot of people, whether startups or established and across sectors. But that's really
we have recognized this centrally, and what we intend doing is the coaching sessions that Sai talked about are meant to follow through. And there are also sessions we're going to encourage the CXO to do, for which we're going to mentor them as well. And right through the window, there are going to be pit stops where we're going to be spending time with CXOs. That's where a lot of customization will happen. But yes, at an abstract level, we need to pick some topics, and we can pick a generic enough topic that people can kind of connect to.
I'm sure what is invaluable is the faculty that will be left behind with them, or the ability for them to kind of use the tools that are given for solving a situation or a problem to apply back in their context. That could be the biggest takeaway.
So I think we are kind of running out of time, but I'm sure that, you know, with so many questions that are coming through, with all the insights that have been shared by you, Manoj and Gopi, and of course Sai, I'm hoping that we will be able to schedule another webinar as we come closer to the Unpredict program that happens in March. Thank you so much for joining us, Manoj, Gopi, Sai. It's been a very, very insightful session. I'm sure it is going to make people be 2018 ready. Thank you so much to all the attendees and participants who have joined us for this webinar today. So let's Unpredict. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.